Well, looking at this chart, it's difficult.
All right, everybody, we'll come to order in 1 minute. All right, good morning, everybody. Today's the second day of budget hearings. We have Orleans Parish Communications District, JJIC Juvenile Justice Intervention Center, Office of Independent Police Monitor, and Orleans Parish Coroner. So, good morning to OPCD. Please come to the table and introduce yourselves. And we'll go through your presentation. I know we will have questions. Thank you. And just for purposes of roll, Councilmember Thomas is here, Councilmember Moreno, Morel, Harris, and myself. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Budget Chair, Council President, Vice President, Council members. I'm Carl Fessel, the Interim Executive Director of the Orleans Parish Communication District. I was appointed on July 11th following the departure of Tyrell Morris. To my left is Deputy Executive Director Heather Hilliard, a newly created position that she's been in for 4 weeks now. To my right is our Finance Manager, Cassandra Robert. Further to the right is Director John Thomas, who is also the Chair of the OPCD Board of Commissioners. To his right is Colin Arnold, also Vice Chair of the OPCD Board of Commissioners. It's my privilege and honor to be here today in front of you through the budget process to represent the 112 first responders in our operations division, and I look forward to presenting our proposed budget.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, next page. We've made some changes to the OPCD org chart. Following my appointment, we've eliminated several middle management type positions and added the Deputy Executive Director position, which 911 operations and 311 operations report to, as well as facilities, excuse me, and our HR department. The technology department, communications, and finance still report to me. Next. The agenda, as requested, is our 2023 accomplishments, 2024 goals, 2023 budget summary and budget request, and new initiatives for 2024. In 2023, OPCD, working with Rave Communications, which is now a division of Motorola Solutions, deployed the Rave software in all K through 12 schools in Orleans Parish. The school side of it was provided by the state in a grant, but the 911 center was also required to implement the technology to be able to receive the alerts and act upon them. Last year, Director Morris presented that we were going to do a compensation study that has been completed and has affected our budget request for this year with regards to personnel payroll matters. We are working with our 911 telephony vendor, Carbine, to deploy artificial intelligence, two-way translation, automatic on incoming calls. We have one-way translation now working, providing a transcript for our emergency communication specialists. But first quarter next year, we'll be working on implementing the two-way translation. We will not be bringing in the live translator as a part of that, but this will allow us to catch and possibly start with the process before we can get that translator online and cover spontaneous utterances by the caller, et cetera, that our ECS may not understand. We are also going through 100% review of all OPCD policies, procedures, as well as job descriptions in order to make sure that we've got the right people doing the right jobs.
Before you go to the next page, what's going on with Hexagon?
Hexagon was canceled.
All right, but
I
I mean, there's got to be, wait, hang on, let me get the question.
So-
Wait, let me get the question
sorry.
now, please. Because I want to be able to make sure I have the question right. I want to make sure you understand it. What is replacing Hexagon?
OPCD is not involved in that process. New Orleans Police Department, City of New Orleans are determining what they're going to do instead of using Hexagon.
So OPCD will have no say whatsoever in what is being used?
We will be involved in the interface to the CAD system, the providing of the data from our side into it. But Hexagon is a law records management system.
I understand that. That's not my question. My question is, you understand the city spent a lot of money, and I realize this is your predecessor who pushed having Hexagon. So I'm not trying to say or even intimate that it is your responsibility. But given that the city has now wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars on another system, I want to make sure whatever we purchase is adequate moving forward. So I think the public deserves to understand what is going to happen, how is it going to be implemented, and how is it integrated seamlessly.
I understand and I appreciate the comment. OPCD has also wasted a lot of money on that. And I am perfectly willing to assist, to be an SME, a subject matter expert, with whatever, as they procure, whatever they procure, but we are not driving that bus. We will ensure that whatever interfacing and whatever work is necessary to make it work with our CAD system, et cetera, will work.
Will OPCD have the ability to review analysis based on the system? In other words, I mean, I know other people will get to it, but if things are being downgraded, and again, I'm going to leave other people to it, will you have the capacity to test that as well, or that only be an OPD?
I am assuming that we will have read access to the system because the RMS will contain criminal history information, arrest information, et cetera, that is pertinent to our dispatchers dealing with officer safety issues. I hadn't actually considered whether we needed to be involved in looking at the other issues you were speaking of, because we don't downgrade. The downgrades are performed by field supervisors for the agencies. We upgrade, we can upgrade, but in general, we don't make calls a code 1 if they come in as a code 2.
I understand, but you also are a repository of what happens with calls too, right? In other
Correct.
words, if a call is deprioritized or downgraded, OPC does that. So in fairness, I think it provides a belt and suspenders to what NOPD is doing.
Understood. It will be in the CAD system, but again, all that data will be going to the RMS as well. All of the CAD incident information was intended and was set up to flow into Hexagon and will be flowing into whatever else. That's a fundamental piece of an RMS.
Do you know how much longer it will be to the new Hexagon replacement will be up and running?
No, sir.
That's an NOPD question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Next slide. During the fourth quarter of 2023, we are dealing with ensuring we have 100% compliance with all position-specific required training. We are dealing with making sure we have 100% compliance on all staff on mandatory operations training, and dealing with 100% compliance on all training required by those who dispatch for our client agencies, specific things they need to know in order to dispatch police, fire, EMS, SPCA, mobile crisis intervention unit. Because of my deputy executive director's background in education, we are also improving considerably our whole training program and our whole training approach to training using adult learner concepts that we were not aware of at that point. We have also entered into an agreement to provide a chaplain full-time at OPCD for the mental health issues of our, of our employees. One of the things that came out during the compensation study focus groups was the employees' desire for enhanced mental health assistance. We have the standards provided under the health insurance, et cetera, but we're expanding the chaplaincy program or creating the chaplaincy program. We've been working with EMS and had Frank come visit several times. We ended up with a 2.5 hour crisis debrief of the personnel who were working the night of America Street. Next slide is a comparison of September last year and September this year. You'll notice that our total calls did not increase that much. Our staffing is effectively stagnant between the two because while we have 105 staff in operations, 8 of those just graduated 2 weeks ago and are not flying solo as call takers. We are experiencing still the same problems that 911 is nationwide with staffing issues, and we are down approximately 1/3 as far as operations personnel goes.
Councilmember Harris.
Hey there, how are you? Talk to me about what abandoned means. So you have in 2022, 10% abandoned call rate, and 2023, a 14% abandoned call rate. What does that mean?
Abandoned calls are calls where the caller hangs up before their call is presented to one of our personnel.
Okay,
So you call 911, you get the voice greeting that says, everybody's busy, please hold on. You're in a queue. And the queue is first in, first out, being presented to the call takers as they free from other calls.
is there any way to track whether or not these abandoned calls are second time callers, or if a call was abandoned and then somebody calls again? So for example, I called 911 the other day because I encountered somebody who was like passed out on the street. I waited for 911. It took me through the process about 3 minutes, waited for about 10 minutes. Nobody showed up. I then called NOPD to try to get somebody to come out. Finally, I see an ambulance, but in the meantime, I called 911 again. But when I saw the ambulance, I abandoned the call. So is there any way to track if this is a second time caller abandonment, or if if the abandoned call is followed up by an actual taken call?
So if your call goes to abandoned status, it goes to an abandoned call list. When our personnel are clear of the other calls that were coming in, they do what's called working that list and calling back. If you call again in the interim while your call is in the abandoned list, it gets cleared from that list automatically. So they won't try to call you back if we've spoken to you. As far as relating to other callers at the same location, currently we have no way to do that. We have to take the call, get the information. When the information is being entered, it'll be recognized by the computer assisted dispatch system as an existing call, and the information from the new caller will be used to supplement it.
For the, so you're saying for the abandoned calls, there's a list that then your call takers call back the person
Correct.
who abandoned the call?
Yes, ma'am.
And so what percentage of those callbacks result in a dispatch or report of an emergency?
I can't tell you that off the top of my head.
Do you have that information available that you can get to us?
I believe we can get it. I'll check when I get back to the office and advise either yes, we can and we'll get it for you, or no, we can't with the current system.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I mean, there's so many times where people call and, you know, they're put on hold or they say text whatever, so they hang up. So it'd be interesting to know how many of those abandoned calls actually result in a reported emergency. And then I guess I also want to know what kind of emergency, and so is it a level 1, level 2, level 3? And what is the ultimate outcome of that? If you can provide that information, stripping out any personally identifying information.
Certainly. Let me see what we can pull from the systems and I'll let you know what the results are. The next slide is through the hours of busy hours, call volume versus our answer times, et cetera. We're looking at September 22 and September 23. The NENA 1 standard is 10% of calls, 90% of calls within the first 10 seconds. So that is standard, national goal that we strive to reach. We are not reaching it currently. We were reaching it from February until the end of July when we had mandatory overtime in place. However, you can't continue mandatory overtime forever, given that we were burning out personnel as well as burning through budget. So we reluctantly had to cancel that mandatory overtime and go back to reality, which is roughly 80%. So we're answering 80% of our 911 calls within the first 10 seconds. We also provided for you the 2012 comparison where we had 998,000 calls versus 1.6 million in 2023. It's an average of 14,000 per call taker in 2012 and 16,000 in 2023. That's one of the reasons why we are continually recruiting, training, trying to get to our authorized strength. I believe when we get there, we will meet the standards, but if we don't, we will have to look towards increasing what that authorized strength is. As you're aware, we also handle 311. This slide is a list. It's a list of 311 service requests in 21, 2022, and 2023. As you can see, it's down somewhat for 2023. The reason for that is we haven't had any major issues. No COVID, no activations, no storms, no anything else. That being said, it is still a large volume of calls.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Moreno.
Thanks. Do the 311 call takers are separate from the 911 call takers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so that additional in the previous slide that you had, that increase from, 998,000 to 1.6 million, that's not due because of 311
No,
calls?
ma'am.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
We're also finding that with the advent of text messaging, with the advent of our Carbine system where callers can provide video, et cetera, that the handling of each 911 call is taking longer. So that specifically increased once we added that increased capabilities to our systems. The next slide is simply a further comparison of 311 volume. We have a total of 6 staff members in
Okay,
311.
before you go back, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the numbers here. It looks like the calls are down. I mean, are you saying I get sanitation because obviously the contractual issue, but when we say Department of Public Works is down 30%, I just want to make sure what we're attributing that to.
Yeah, it's 30% of the total call volume.
It's 30% of the total call volume.
The column to the right.
Yeah, okay. So that's 30% of all the calls you receive then on 311 is about
Correct.
Public Works. Got it.
Sanitation is almost 60%, et
Okay.
cetera.
Got it. Well, I just think the numbers are kind of staggering when you look at 88% of your calls are about 2 departments.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just a
Yes, Councilmember
Sorry.
Moreno.
So I'm just looking at, some of the departments that you answer for. I mean, the Board of Liquidation, why would you take their calls? Why can't they just, you've got some departments here where you would just think that maybe they should just call the department instead of going through 311.
I follow your logic.
So
If I could add, I think that people have a lot of faith in 311 to get questions resolved. And I think that when there's questions about taxes, property taxes, millages, other things that 311 would refer those calls to the various departments. So that would would explain the Board of Liquidation. Maybe somebody had a question about city bond issues or something like that. And so they really are a clearinghouse for any manner of call.
And
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, so since I think the beginning of this year, 311 has been taking under the Michael Burnside rule, lien poll complaints. Do you have any, idea of how many that you've received?
Not offhand, not the specifics around a particular type, but again, I will check with our director of 311 Ops and see if we can pull that.
Yeah, because I'd like to know that. I'm sure Mr. Burnside, our eighth council person, would like to know that as well.
Thank you.
Certainly, I'm just writing a note so I don't forget everything. It is important to note that we're aware the city is putting out an RFP for an asset management / ticket tracking system that will interface with 311 and allow citizens to automatically receive updates to the tickets that they have called in as the city agencies or departments take action. The secondary follow-up calls asking why hasn't the hole been fixed, et cetera, are a significant portion of what we receive. So the 311 volume year over year, pretty self-explanatory. Our 2024 goals. The first and most important one is to implement the new NOFD fire station alerting system. The city provided the funding through ARPA funds for that project. However, given that most of the heavy lifting is at the 911 center with the fire station alerting server, the interface with the CAD system, et cetera, we're the point group on that. And we found it works far better to have a single customer dealing with the vendors rather than a bifurcated chain of command, as it were. We had a kickoff meeting on that project earlier this week. The anticipated completion is May of 2025. This will involve both deployment of new hardware, wiring, et cetera, at every firehouse in the city and the implementation of the system at OPCD, and will provide a much better alerting system than the one we've been using since 2007. We intend to continue working and actually submit ACE and CALIA accreditation applications. ACE is the priority dispatch protocol certification for each discipline, and then CALIA is the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, which also does communication centers. We will be continuing to refine the budget and the compensation study recommendations. I was dropped in on July 11th and basically started from ground zero with the budget. So I apologize for some of the back and forth I've had with your staff on not having things done correctly. It's been a learning experience. We have in our budget an increase of 10% for operations personnel. That sounds fantastic until you find out the compensation study said they're 28% underpaid. That's what we could manage this year. Next year, when we have more time to prep the budget and get everything together, there will be a larger increase or a larger budget request in order to cover not only bringing operations staff more to where they belong, but the rest of OPCD staff as well. The technology team is underpaid by 15% currently. And it's only by the grace of their loyalty that they haven't walked out to take jobs elsewhere. They believe in the mission, but any of them can go into private industry and do better. So we really don't want to lose that experience, et cetera.
Okay, so I just want, if the studies are showing that, you know, that there's a 28% increase that is necessary, why wouldn't you ask for a 28% increase and just, instead of just doing the 10%?
And the study, the compensation, the consultants that we used actually acknowledged that in government in general, it's hard to push through a massive increase like that. They actually recommended we go for 5% per year. We've gone to the 10 because that's what I could make work within my budget request.
Okay.
And I was trying to not, again, first year doing this, trying to not go over what we had requested last year, given the whole millage increase, the commitment to not roll forward the millages, et cetera.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, at the end of the day, 911 services are life-saving operations, and we've seen some significant issues with 911 services over the past several years. Obviously, staffing is a key piece. You just mentioned this again. I mean, I would prefer for you to try to redo your budget documents and ask for what you need to keep people there, particularly since you're talking about, you can't even meet the national standards of answering, 90% of 911 calls within 10 seconds. Councilmember Harris just had an experience herself where, she was put on hold and she had to hang up because nobody answered. I mean, so I don't understand, like, I don't know what consultants you hired, but, we're the city council. At the end of the day, we're going to decide what you should get. And I can tell you that we need this 911 system fixed. And, Mr. Chair, I'd like for the budget documents to be, at least revised so we can see what a 28% increase would look like.
So, yeah, Councilmember Harris.
And I think to that point, I'm looking at your budget template with the overtime of in 2019, 200K, $1.2 million in 2020, 2021, $500,000, 2022, almost $500,000, and then this year, $325,000 in overtime. It makes sense to me to roll that money into actual salaries and what these people need to be paid rather than just going with this $9 million number. Which I see represents a 10% increase, but if you take into consideration the large amount of overtime that you've been paying in the past, it makes sense to just increase salaries to get people where they need to be.
So increasing the salaries will not necessarily eliminate any of that overtime. In fact, it will bump it up some until we can get to full staffing. And realistically, we're not going to hit full staffing until possibly the end of next year. With the number of applicants we see, the classes, I don't know how much of an increase we're going to get when we raise the starting pay. We'll find out, but I'm trying to balance all of that together.
What's your starting pay right now?
Go ahead.
Heather Hilliard, Deputy Executive
Good morning.
Director. Good morning. Councilwoman Harris, it is $15.54 for a new recruit. Once they come out and they are released, as we noted in the earlier slide, there are 8 trainees that are co-flying right now. They move up to $16.64. So the 10% would impact both the $15.64 and $16.64.
So they make less than our lifeguards who make $18 an hour.
If that is what they make, then at this time, yes, ma'am.
That's a real problem.
And I appreciate the statements that you support the 28%, and so do the staff.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Let me just say this. I went to law school to avoid all math. That's always the irony of being the budget chair. But it's about $3.5 million is what the increase is. I guess, Mr. Fasold, what I would like to know is, obviously, I think you're hearing a lot from this committee that we
Yes,
want
sir.
to fund it. I always am leery though, because I've seen what happens in past is you fund personnel and either one of two things happens. One, it becomes a slush fund for operating, just being candid. I'm not saying you would do that. I'm saying it happens. And then number two, you fund the money and you can't hire obviously in the first 3 months. So if you could also lay out for us, if we're going to fund 3.5 in what increments you need it, because we can do like we did with NOPD, like we did with the sheriff, and fund, $1.5 million, $2 million to start you out. And then as you're getting closer, make sure you get the money as you see the horizon.
I will be happy to do that and provide it to y'all.
We please do. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
sir.
In speaking with that, and moving forward to next gen 911, we're also realizing that our our expenses have increased and will continue to increase. So we have spoken to other 911 centers, et cetera, as to what they're doing for funding. Because as you know, our funding is based on the 911 fees on phones that are billed in Orleans Parish, as well as the CEA with the city of New Orleans to provide for the operations, personnel, et cetera, that we started incurring in 2016 when we consolidated. There are other places and facilities that actually have millages that have part of a hotel motel tax component that is dedicated to 911. And given the number of visitors the city has, which currently utilize the system a lot and don't really contribute to it, that's very appealing to us. So you're going to see more on that coming forward next year to try to work out something on that aspect to actually have our visitors start paying part of the tab for the 911 services, because obviously it is extremely important to our residents, but it is just as important to everybody who comes here and has a problem. So we would appreciate y'all's help with that when the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're happy to. The only reason I'm being hesitant is it always helps us to know the full integrated plan from the administration on what they're doing. OPCD is clearly a part of that. Also, I think you know that the administration fought for fair share. We've also been critical of how much of New Orleans money goes to the rest of the state. So we would love to see, particularly when things are benefiting tourists, that money staying here and being directed to you, so it doesn't come out of city coffers instead. But
Understood.
please let us know how you all plan on dealing with that legislatively.
Yes, sir. As I spoke earlier about, we're aware of the RFP for the city's new order management inventory tracking system. We are working with ITI to ensure that when that contract is awarded, the vendor is selected, that it will integrate fully with 311 and be able to eliminate some of those repeat calls and all. And that is another big piece for us. Next slide is revenue and expenses. I'll just point out that the variance on the first line intergovernmental transfers being down this year is due to the fact of the large transfer in dealing with the Hexagon additions, the change orders and things like that the city funded. The fire station alerting project was funded in this year, 2023, off of ARPA funding. And so that's another one time that is not reflected as part of the 24 budget. Further initiatives, we're looking to increase training, enhance training, as I said earlier. We also intend to proceed forward with something that was planned as part of the original consolidation project, but was never implemented, of 100% compliance for supervisors and above being certified in all three disciplines as a dispatcher. They may have to supervise them, they need to understand how to dispatch them, et cetera. And that was part of the original consolidation recommendations that was never implemented or carried forward. So we're going to be pushing on that. It also gives us a lot more flexibility in filling slots if somebody calls off, et cetera. We're looking to implement a system called ASAP to PSAP, which is an automated method for alarm companies to send alarm information directly to us without having to make a phone call involving our personnel getting tied up on the phone with them. A large percentage of our calls are alarm companies and they take up a considerable amount of time. So if we can get them to come through electronically, this would also still be checking against the CRY-Wolf false alarm database to ensure that something sent electronically for a place that's in a no response status due to false alarms doesn't get through the system there. We'll also eliminate typos, problems with addresses, et cetera, that we routinely encounter. As you're aware, we got a capital budget outlay or capital budget authorization from the state for an expansion of the OPCD campus. We intend to proceed with the design completion for replacing the current metal building that functioned as the 911 center from 2006 to 2012, where our admin offices are now and where we bunk people during activations, et cetera, with a building that will meet those needs better and have everything we need for activations, as well as sufficient space for admin personnel, support personnel, et cetera. We're continually looking to see if we can do anything to improve our recruitment, to improve our retention. We use evaluation systems for new applicants to ensure that they have the native skill sets necessary, that they can listen to something coming in a headset and type at the same time, et cetera, to try to eliminate washouts later on in the program after we spent a lot of money training them. We are also implementing a ride-along process where those who have applied for jobs before they start the academy will actually sit in a chair next to an ECS and see what the job is actually like, so that if they want to determine that it's not for them, they can withdraw at that point versus after we spend a lot of time and effort training them. That concludes the formal budget presentation from my side. I know various members had other questions, and I'll be happy to do my best to answer them.
Thank you, sir. All right, Council President, Council Vice President.
Well, I know that people learn different ways, so trying to branch out and to provide alternative means than just simply asking questions. So I want to talk about going on arrivals, but I think there's some illustrative video that Mr. Harang's going to play for us before I start.
One second. But looking at this chart, it's difficult to talk about the gone on arrivals. What incidents were reported? Are they instances of violence, or are these all collective? These are violent crimes. So let's see. So on average, I think that when it comes to responding to sexual assaults and the GOA markup or disposition, there's multifaceted. There are many reasons why. It could be that the victim really did not want to see us, or I mean, they were actually going. But as the head of the violent crime task force, do y'all study the request for the follow-ups and gone on arrival and the discrepancy? No, we're not. What we're looking at right now is that's a problem. Okay. Nevertheless, I mean, it's multifaceted, so I think it is inappropriate to mix this into this basket
Well,
like
I think it's
Your numbers are based upon those gone arrivals never existing.
but the gone on arrivals are not elements in the major categories of violent crime, the murders, the shootings, and so I can't articulate to you that what this chart means. If you were to break it out by incident type and priority and time lapse, so we can really see what was reported to 911, like a shooting in progress marked up GOA, yes, that's a challenge, but I don't think that's the reality.
all right.
Hey, everyone, Roman here.
Thanks, Roman. All right, so gone on arrival. This council, I know our analyst Jeff Asher is present, for 2 years has brought up gone on arrivals as a significant issue as far as both establishing the performance of 911 as well as the police department. I can tell you that most people understand 911 to be the people you call to make sure you get help. And the reason why I believe, because obviously there is some shared responsibility, if not a little bit more on NOPD with gone on arrivals, honestly, but the reason why gone on arrivals infuriate people is because when you look at what everything 911 represents, it's supposed to be when that person calls for help, you don't hand them off till they get help. And the reason why I played that video, and I'll play it again for NOPD, is that there is a sense of betrayal from people who call 911 for help, and there is no assurance help ever showed up. So what is the policy of the communications district on how it handles gone on arrivals? And more importantly, if someone calls for help, how do you track that they got help?
.911 is a point of contact. We take the call, we document the call, we create the incident. Goes to a dispatcher. The dispatcher will dispatch a field unit if someone is available. If there are no field units available, we broadcast the call. It's a code 2 call or a priority call, which is, I assume, what we're really worried about for GOAs. We broadcast the call. So everyone on that district channel hears that that call is holding. If no one then clears from a call and says, send me on that call, we broadcast it to the field rank or the agency and advise them directly that this rape, car accident, domestic violence, whatever is holding. At that point, I have done everything I can do as communications in order to get someone dispatched to that. Yeah, unlike the movie, my people can't get up from their desk and go jump in a car and go respond to it. I
don't think that's an
being
expectation,
ludicrous, but yeah.
but does a 911 operator stay on the line with someone to make sure they get help?
We will stay on the line as long as the caller wants to stay on the line. Part of the protocols that we have, the IAED, is what's called pre-arrival instructions. And at that point, we go through, it can be for a cardiac arrest, how to do CPR and walk them through it and count out the compressions with them, et cetera. It can be for bleeding, how to stop bleeding, et cetera. For police calls, it's, are you in a safe place? Can you get to a safe place? Are your doors locked? Do you have animals put away? Are there animals in the yard that could be a threat to responders, et cetera? I'm not really sure what else we, as the communications, can do.
Well, essentially, you guys are the filter between the person and the dispatcher, correct?
We are the dispatcher as well. We're the filter between.
Well, the way you just described the handoff, it's 911 goes to the dispatcher. So the dispatcher is 911 as well.
They're us too, correct.
Okay.
Yes,
So
I'm sorry.
if 911 is the dispatcher as well, and a person, let's say a woman is a victim of a sexual assault, she's been raped. Obviously, the first question will be, are you in a safe place? Have you secured yourself? Is the person on premises? That line of questioning will wait for an OPD, because that's a whole separate issue on downgrading, because according to you, just for the record, 911 cannot downgrade calls, correct?
We do not downgrade. We do assign initial priority to the call based upon the incident type. Let me backtrack slightly. We use the International Academies of Emergency Dispatch protocols. Those protocols go through the questions that we've talked about. There are send points in them, so if it's a critical incident, it can be sent to the dispatcher while the call taker is still on the phone. Eventually, we get to a final determinant code. Those determinant codes encapsulate from the priority dispatch standpoint what the incident is, et cetera. Those determinant codes are mapped in the CAD system to the incident types for the agencies. So 114 Alpha 32 might be a car accident with injuries.
Well, I guess not this, because I want to follow this line of questioning. I think you can give me a more complete response. One of the number one complaints we've heard about going on arrival, something that we have brought up repeatedly for 2 years, and the monitor has confirmed, is that part of the downgrading process, whether it's done on your end on NOPD, takes into account things like, have you been raped, and is the guy that raped you still there? And that the call can be quantified on its emergency status, whether or not the person who committed the crime is still present. Is that true?
And how long it's been since the crime was committed? Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that speaks to safety.
I understand, but I guess the question is, and this would certainly be a question that I'll pose. I'll get Jeff to go look at for best practices. How aggressively is that call downgraded versus when the person is on premises versus when they're not? Because I've had incidents where people have spoken to me and said they were shot at, and once they said the person that shot at me isn't there, their call was downgraded. Now, I come from a family of law enforcement. I have a lot of friends who are in law enforcement. If you were shot at the first time, doesn't mean you won't be shot at again. So I guess the question is, if the person who shot at you and missed, and you call 911 and they go, well, he's not there anymore, that doesn't mean the person isn't lying in wait to start shooting again. How does that downgrade work?
It's not really.
How does that initial grading work?
It's the initial priority. And again, I have to speak to your question with two answers, because there's that what's happening right now and what we've been working with NOPD and the consent decree monitors, et cetera, on implementing realistically within the next 3 weeks. So in September of 2022, you're aware there was a change to NOPD incident types by my predecessor. I do not know who, if anyone, at NOPD was involved in those decisions, who at NOPD, if anyone, was involved in the assignment of the default priorities to the incident types, looking at the how long since it happened, did it just occur, in progress, is the perpetrator still there, has it been 0 or 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 15, or even where those particular time periods came from. That,
And I think what we'll find, I've spoken to people at NOPD who are involved in that process, and they weren't consulted on changing wholesale over to a different system of how you classify crimes. And I think what's very problematic, I guess this is my concern right now to listen to your presentation. I only speak for